We end our journey through the Apocrypha, the literature of the Second Temple period written after the Old Testament closes for the most part. Now, I think Daniel would be an exception in there. But then before the writing of the New Testament, again, this is the world of Jesus. This is the world of Paul. This is the world of the New Testament, the disciples. This is the world that our faith emerged out of. So tonight we finish up the series and we finish up Enoch with books 4 and books 5. So far, what we looked at the past 2 weeks is the first 3 of the 5 books of Enoch. Quick review. Book 1, called the Book of the Watchers, explains the presence of evil in the world, not in the way that the rest of our Old Testament does, that is, with an understanding of Adam and Eve and sin, that we're responsible for it. But the Book of the Watchers explains the presence of evil in the world in terms of fallen angels, the Watchers. And here, for the first time, we begin to see an idea that carries forward in the New Testament in our world, this idea of a satanic or demonic force within the world, a force, a spiritual force that opposed to God. So when you turn to, for example, the book of Revelation, you see fleshed out in great detail what you see in the Book of the Watchers. The Book of the Watchers also contains cosmic journeys of heaven and hell. Dante, Milton, others will develop this in the future, but here we have the earliest form of those. And along with the tours of heaven and hell, of course, you have the ultimate destiny of the people who are good and the people of evil, the people who will be in heaven and the people who will be in hell. And this book actually contains the earliest known account of the Last Judgment. So it's incredibly rich material. Book 2, known as the Similitudes, or the Book of Parables, because there are different manuscripts of this, and some use one term, some use the other. But a similitude and a parable are just 2 ways of saying the same thing. The content of that book, though, is not actually parables in the sense that we would use the term. They are apocalyptic visions about the future that God will bring. The author simply refers to these as parables. These visions attack kings, rulers, governors, landowners, high officials, and landlords. The writer sees these as the people who oppress God's people, and so these are the evil ones. The first parable was about the coming judgment on these figures that God will bring. The second parable goes into detail about exactly how they will be punished. And the third parable then narrates the story of Noah and the flood as sort of the primary example of God's act of righteous judgment upon the evil. The book of parables includes several chapters, we looked at this last week, on the Son of Man, as the one who will bring God's judgment. The Son of Man is, of course, a term that Jesus uses to describe himself in the Gospels. So one of them would be Matthew 9:6, but so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he then said to the paralytic, stand up, take your bed, and go to your home. Jesus will use the term Son of Man for himself 81 times in the Gospels. That term Son of Man is also used in the book of Revelation and the book of Acts to talk about Jesus. So that term gets identified for Christians clearly with Jesus of Nazareth. Book 3, known as the Book of the Luminaries, or the astronomical book, and the same, again, 2 titles, same thing. We're talking about the stars in the heavens, which would include the moon, the planets, all those shiny things in the sky, which are luminaries. But of course, astronomical book, again, you're talking about the stars. This book focuses on the movements of the heavenly bodies in the sky. The book is essentially an expansion of some material found in Genesis chapter 1. It's worth looking at again, verses 14 through 18. And God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to separate the light from the darkness. Now, the Book of Luminaries, of course, goes into a lot more detail about these luminaries, but essentially it's arguing that the dependable movements of heavenly bodies, which the ancients have known about for thousands of years, show that God is in control and that God can be trusted. In much the same way, we have another metaphor brought in, which is the heavenly tablets, that Enoch is also shown in Book 3. And these heavenly tablets assure Enoch that God's future can be trusted, just like the stars indicate this, the tablets do. In the context of the image, God's future is literally written in stone on the tablets, so you can trust it. You can trust the stars, you can trust the tablets, you can trust God. This future that God will be bringing includes the coming judgment of the ruling elites, as well as God's reward for his chosen, who are in fact suffering persecution by the elites. The book of the Luminaries ends by connecting wrong calendar practice with sin. So tonight we're going to finish the book of 1 Enoch, books 4, book 5, book 4, which is chapters 81 through 91. And again here at 91, 92 sort of dividing lines. So 91, 92 sometimes get put in book 4, get put in book 5, depending. This section, though, 81 following, is known as the dream visions. It is clearly written in the Maccabean period and directly connects to the events we see in the book of Maccabees. Book 5, chapters 91, 92 forward, or 91 forward, or 93 forward, depending on which scholar you talk to, is known as the Epistle of Enoch, contains, as Richard was sharing with us, woes and blessings. Book 4, the dream visions, beginning with what's called, well, the animal apocalypse is the biggest piece of what's in this. Book 4 is made up of 3 dream visions. We're going to have a vision of the flood, that's the Noah flood. We're going to have what's called the animal apocalypse. We're going to look at that in detail tonight. And then we're going to look at the apocalypse of weeks, which we'll look at sort of in comparison to the animal apocalypse. Apocalypse in the same sense that the book of Revelation is apocalypse. You'll see they're very, very similar. The images are different, the metaphors are different, but the way they're handled is very, very similar. This book begins with the heavenly tablets and an assurance about the future. This is written to people who are suffering, they're being persecuted, they're wondering, has God abandoned them? They're not sure what's coming, they're not sure that they have a future, and so we need to assure them. It begins with 81. Then the angel said to me, Enoch, look at the heavenly tablets, read what is written on them, and understand everything on them. So I looked at the heavenly tablets. I read all that was on them, and I came to understand everything. So this lays the pattern for what's going to follow. It's what he sees in the tablets, what he's read, and what he now understands that he will now narrate. I read that book and all of the deeds of all of humanity for all the generations of the world. A beatitude. Blessed are the righteous who listen to the words of wisdom, who walk in the path of righteousness, and who do not sin, for they shall be saved. The first vision, 2 chapters, 83, 84, is a vision about the flood of Noah. Again, we're not covering all of any of this material, just some selected pieces to give you a feel. I saw a scary vision, the sky being hurled down and falling upon the earth. I saw the earth swallowed into the great abyss. I cried out, the whole earth is being destroyed. I was told by the angel, you have seen in your dream a powerful vision, all the sins of the whole world, and it was sinking into the abyss and being destroyed. Hearing this, you immediately know you're dealing with the Noah story. Now arise, Enoch, and pray to the Lord of glory, so that a remnant shall remain upon the earth, and that the whole earth should not be blotted out. And of course, that is Noah and his family are the remnant. The rest of book 4, the dream visions, is made up of 2 apocalypses. The animal apocalypse, which is 6 chapters long, and the apocalypse of weeks, which falls right at the joint between this book and book 5. And scholars today believe that 91 is actually before 93, and so they arrange it in that kind of way. This is the part that's particularly difficult. But once you put it out 91 to 93, it flows perfectly. The animal apocalypse, 6 chapters long, is a summary of the entire biblical narrative from Genesis forward. So let's take a look at this for a second. What it's going to do, look at the center column. We have a little bit 85, and then we have 86, 87, 88. And then mostly it's 89. And then at the end we have some from chapter 90. Left-hand column, creation, the Watcher's descent, which basically is not in the biblical narrative except for just a little snippet about the Watchers. So it's a little tiny bit in Genesis, but it's more elaborately laid out in Enoch 6 to 11. Then the flood, a list of the nations, and of course then you roll with the story. Abraham, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Exodus at Sinai, where they get the law, the wilderness, the conquest, Judges, Samuel and David, Saul and David, Solomon, the divided kingdom, zeroing on Manasseh as the wicked king and the destruction, the 70 shepherds, which we have no parallel to in the Bible, and then a long period on the angelic rulers, symbolically rulers, angelic beings, but they in fact are Babylon, Persia, the Ptolemies, and the Seleucids, which those of us who've been studying the history, that's the order. You know, Babylon destroys, Persia replaced Babylon, then the Greeks come under Alexander. First, the Ptolemies of Egypt rule, then the Seleucids. And of course, the last thing is the final judgment, which of course is not an event in the Bible. Right-hand column, you can see the material that parallels. So what this apocalypse does is it basically is going to tell the entire Bible story, condensed, highly condensed. But look at this. It tells the story using the symbolism of animals to represent the various characters. And many of these images are lifted from other scriptures. So in the first section, 85 to 89, you've got white bulls, black bulls, red bulls, stars, and white men. The white bulls, Adam, and the children of Seth, purity. And that's actually, that image is found in Psalm 22. Black bull would be Cain. Red bull, Abel. He died at Cain's hand, so he's red from blood. Stars are the watchers, the evil angels. The white men are the holy ones who would be robed in white. Then in the next section, you get the sheep and the beast, which is Israel. Israel is always the sheep, and the Gentile oppressors are all the other animals. So in the next section, lions and leopards and wolves and hyenas and wild boars and foxes and cones and pigs and falcons and vultures and kites and eagles and ravens. And to the side, you can see who these seem to represent. In many cases, you can see that the imagery is lifted directly from some scriptures. It's a good, safe bet that all of these are lifted from writings of the Jews that were scripture, but that many of these writings have been lost to us. So the blank spaces are probably blank because, not because there wasn't anything they were taking the image from, but because we've lost it. And then at the end down there, look at the shepherds. These are the neglectful Jewish leaders, the bad guys that we hear so much about, and they've been attacked in the early books. So here we go. Start with a nice white cow. I was seeing a vision on my bed, and behold, a cow emerged from the earth. Remember the creation story? Adam is made from the earth, and that bovid was snow white, pure, made by God. And after it, there came forth a female calf, Eve, together with two other calves, well, Cain and Abel, one of which was dark, evil, and the other which was red, will die as a martyr. The dark calf gored the red calf and pursued it over the earth. Thereafter, I was not able to see the red calf. Of course, it had been slain. So using the image of cattle, the author has just told us the story of Adam and Eve, along with Cain and Abel, and the murder of Abel by Cain. So this author is going to proceed through the entire Bible narrative, highly condensed, doing this with animals. Now, the climax of this apocalypse, which we're going to do in detail, not all of it, but quite a bit of detail, is the Maccabean period, for which the author gives the most detailed description. Anytime you have a historical narrative like this, a synopsis, watch where it ends, because that's the time period the author's in. It tells us that the whole point of this narrative, the whole point of this apocalypse, is to lead up to this part, to lead up to what is going on in the period of around the time of the Maccabees. So we're going to do a lot of detail here. This is the most detailed thing we're going to do tonight. And again, remember the animal imagery. If it's sheep, it's God's people of various types. And if it's any other animal, it is the pagans that are out there of various types. And at the end, the shepherds will be the evil shepherds who are not doing their job. That's the simple imagery. After that, I saw with my own eyes all the birds of heaven, eagles, vultures, kites, and ravens. These are all birds of prey or opportunity. The eagles were the ones leading all the birds, and they began to eat those sheep, to dig out their eyes, and to eat their flesh. Then the sheep cried aloud, for their flesh was being eaten by the birds. I too cried aloud and lamented in my sleep on account of that shepherd who was grazing the sheep. I kept seeing till those sheep were eaten by the dogs, the eagles, and the kites. Neither flesh, nor skin, nor sinew was to be found in them. Their bones stood there bare. And look, lambs were born to those white sheep. And these lambs began to open their eyes and to see and to cry out to the sheep. But the sheep did not listen to them, nor attend to their words, but they were extremely deaf, and their eyes were blinded. By the way, these lambs are the authors of this book. These are members of the Jewish community who see what's wrong and are crying it out to others that things are wrong. And I saw in the vision that the ravens flew upon those lambs and seized one of the lambs. And I saw horns come out on those lambs. And the ravens were casting down their horns. And I saw a great horn sprouted on one of these sheep. And I looked on them, and their eyes were opened. And it cried out to the sheep, and the ram saw it, and they all ran to it. Guess who that is? And besides this, all those eagles and vultures and ravens and kites were still tearing the sheep to pieces, flying upon them and devouring them. And the sheep were silent, but the rams lamented and cried out. And those ravens were struggling and fighting with the ram, and wished to do away with its horn, but they did not prevail against it. And I saw the shepherds, the evil leaders, and the eagles, and those vultures, and the kites all working together. And they cried out to the ravens to smash the horn of that ram. And they struggled, and they made war on it. And it was struggling with them, and cried out that its help might come. And I looked until that man came who wrote the names of the shepherds and brought them before the Lord of the sheep. And he helped it and showed it everything. His help came down to that ram. And I saw the Lord of the sheep came upon them in wrath, and all that saw him fled and fell into darkness before him. And all the eagles and the vultures and the ravens and the kites gathered and brought with them all the wild beasts. And they all came together and helped one another smash the horn of the ram. And I looked at the man who wrote the book, at the word of the Lord, until he opened the book of the destruction that those last 12 shepherds worked. And he showed before the Lord of the sheep that they had destroyed more than those before them. And I saw the Lord of the sheep came to them and took in his hand the staff of his wrath and struck the earth, and the earth was split. And all the beasts and all the birds of heaven fell away from among those sheep and sank into the earth, and it covered over them. And I saw a large sword was given to those sheep, and the sheep went out against the wild beasts to kill them, and all the beasts and the birds of heaven fled before them. Wow, there's a lot there. But again, if you know the story of the Maccabean revolt and what led up to it, the book of 2 Maccabees, it's all there. Now, little side trip here. In the animal apocalypse, it's very interesting when the temple is talked about. It's referred to as the tower or the high tower. 3 things stand out about the description of the second temple in this book. So in Enoch 89, we have this. They again began to build as before. This is after the exile. They've come back. They're rebuilding the temple. And they raised up that tower, which is called the high tower. Looking at an image of the temple, there's that central section that's higher than the rest, which would be, of course, where the Holy of Holies is. And they started to place a table before the tower, the table of the showbread, and all the food which is upon it being polluted and impure. Now, 3 things. First, the temple is said to be called a high tower. The inference is it's not really one. So it's not a real legitimate temple. This is likely the period after one group of Hellenists have taken over the temple and are running it and doing things that are just simply abhorrent. Second, the Lord's presence in the temple is not mentioned because, from this perspective, God's not in that temple. In Acts, Stephen will make the same critique of the temple, that God is not there. And by the way, this is what gets him killed. Third, the offerings made at the second temple are polluted and impure. In other words, the group that produced the Enoch literature, like the group at Qumran, and they're probably closely related, they are no fans of the second temple. Book 5, the epistle. Chapter 92. Book 5, which is written by Enoch, the writer of all the signs of wisdom among all the people. It is written for all the offspring that dwell upon the earth, and watch this, and for the latter generations which uphold righteousness and peace. So the story is placed way back in time, the time of the flood, time of Genesis, but its real audience is the 2nd century. So here's the message. Let not your spirit be troubled by the times. For the Holy and Great One has designated specific days for all things. This goes back to the chronology. The Righteous One, this is the Son of Man, shall awaken from his sleep. He shall arise and walk in the ways of righteousness. And all the ways of his conduct shall be in goodness and in generosity forever. And he will be generous to the Righteous One and will give him eternal uprightness. He will give authority and judge in kindness and in righteousness, and they shall walk in eternal light. Sin and darkness shall perish forever. And shall no more be seen from that day forever. A voice calls me, and the Spirit is poured over me, so I may show you everything that shall happen to you forever. So we're going to see the future. Now, the Apocalypse of Weeks retells the history that the animal apocalypse does. It's going to do it again from Adam to the Maccabean period, because that's the period. But this time, instead of using the metaphor of the animals, we're going to use the metaphor of weeks. So, for example, if you look at this second column, the middle column, you've got sort of a running history there of things going on, sort of divided into weeks. We've got the heavenly tablets up front, the initial righteousness of Enoch's time, and then downhill. That's the Apocalypse of Weeks. If you look over on the right-hand side, you'll see the parallel in the animal apocalypse. So these two apocalypses are closely related to each other. They're using different metaphors. Same story, same narrative, the biblical narrative, same points being made. So two apocalypses, originally independent, and both wound up in the book of Enoch. The Apocalypse of Weeks. Then after that, Enoch happened to be recounting from the books, this is the heavenly tablets, and Enoch said, concerning the children of righteousness, the good guys, concerning the elect ones of the world, and the plant of truth. Plant is an image throughout the Old Testament for Israel. Israel is, God refers to it as a vineyard. So in this book, the plant would be not just Israel, but really it's parallel. The children of righteousness, the elect ones, the plant of truth. These are God's good people. I will speak these things, my children, and let you know about it according to that which was revealed to me from the heavenly vision or the tablets. That which I have learned from the words of the holy angels and from the heavenly tablets. He then began to recount from the books and said, I was born the 7th during the 1st week, during which time judgment and righteousness continued to endure. So at this point, we're moving into that 10 weeks of the Apocalypse of Weeks. After me, there shall arise in the 2nd week great and evil things. Deceit will grow, and the first consummation will take place. That's the biblical flood. After that, in the 7th week, I've skipped multiple weeks, of course, the apostate generation shall arise. Of course, who are these? These are the Hellenists, the radical Hellenists who seized the temple and began to do things. Its deeds shall be many, all of them criminal. At its completion, there shall be elected the elect ones of righteousness from the eternal plant of righteousness. So the good guys, to whom shall be given 7-fold instruction concerning the flock. And that's what you see in the book of Enoch. After it is ended, injustice shall become greater, and he shall make a law for the sinners. The first heaven will pass away, a new heaven will appear. You may remember this image is taken exactly in the book of Revelation. And the heavens will shine forever with sevenfold brightness, perfect brightness. There will be many weeks without number. This is in the future. Glorious. Many weeks without number, forever, in which they will do piety and righteousness. And from then on, sin will never be mentioned again. So very much like the beautiful ending of the book of Revelation. Now, the rest of the Epistle of Enoch is devoted to the closing woes and blessings and the glorious future of God's chosen. Enoch 24:94. And now I say to you, my children, love righteousness and walk in it. For the paths of righteousness are worthy of acceptance, but the paths of iniquity will quickly be destroyed. Then we're going to go back and forth, talking about the wicked and the righteous, the wicked and the righteous. 94, the wicked. Woe to those who build on oppression and injustice. Woe to those who build their houses with sin. This is the part Richard was looking at earlier. More about the wicked. 94. Woe to you, you rich, for you have trusted in your riches, because you have not remembered the Most High in the day of your riches. 96, more about the wicked. Woe to you, sinners, for your riches make you appear righteous. Again, there's that Deuteronomic theology. If you prosper, it's because you are a good person. If you suffer, it's because you're evil. Here, the theology is attacked. Woe to you, you're sinners, but your riches make people think that you're righteous. No, you're not righteous. Woe to you, mighty, who with might oppress the righteous ones. Woe to you who amass gold and silver. Woe unto you, O rich people, for you have put your trust in your wealth. It's like a drumbeat over and over. Woe to you who acquire gold and silver unjustly, and who say, we have become very wealthy. We have acquired all that we wished. More about the wicked. 98. Woe to you, fools, who do not listen to the wise. This is interesting. The wise would be the people who are producing these books of Enoch. And again, remember the little lambs that their eyes woke up and they called out to the sheep and the sheep would not hear him? Here we have it in a different language. Woe to you, fools, who do not listen to the wise lambs. Woe to you, stiff-necked and hard of heart, taking an image right out of the Exodus story, who do evil. Woe to you who rejoice in the troubles of the righteous. Woe to you who lie and commit evil deeds. Woe to you who pervert the eternal covenant. Took over the temple, doing things that are not nice. But blessed will be all who listen to the words of the wise, who learn to do the commandments and walk in paths of righteousness, and who do not err, for they will be saved. More about the wicked. 99. Woe to those who reject the foundation and the eternal inheritance of our fathers. We reject our heritage. But the wise will seek the truth, and the sons of the earth will contemplate the words of this epistle, and they will recognize that their wealth cannot save them. Now, some words about the righteous. Fear not, you souls of the righteous, and be hopeful, you who have died in righteousness. And do not grieve if your soul has descended into grief and Sheol, but wait for the day of the Lord. 103, more about the righteous. I know a mystery. I have read the heavenly tablets. I have seen the holy books. I have found written and inscribed on them this regarding the dead, that all goodness and joy and glory has been prepared for those who have died, and manifold good shall be given to them as a reward for their labors, and their spirits shall not perish, and that their lot is abundantly beyond and better that of the lot of the living. And the spirits of those who have died in righteousness shall live again, and they shall rejoice. Back to the wicked. Woe to you, you sinners, when you have died. If you die in the wealth of your sins, know that your souls will descend into Sheol, and they will be wretched in their great suffering. Your spirits shall enter into darkness and chains and a burning flame. There where is grievous and great judgment. Woe to you, for you shall have no peace. Back to the righteous. In death you shall shine as the lights of heaven. You shall shine, and you shall be seen. The portals of heaven shall be open to you. Be hopeful, and cast not away your hope. For you shall have great joy as the angels in heaven. Fear not, you righteous, for you shall become champions of the host of heaven. Back to the heavenly books. I know a second mystery, that to the righteous, the pious, and the wise, my books will be given for a joy of righteousness and wisdom, and they will believe in them. More about the heavenly books. Those who work evil shall have their names blotted out from the book of life, and fire shall consume them. More about the heavenly books. For there are books and records about them in heaven above, so that the angels may read them, and know what will happen to the sinners, as well as to the spirits of the humble, and those who afflicted their bodies, and those abused by evil men, those who love God, and do not love gold and silver, and all the good things that are in this world, but gave their bodies to torment. These are the martyrs who died for the faith, and those who did not desire the food that is in the world, but considered themselves as a breath that passed away. And to this they kept. The Lord tested them much, and their spirits were found pure, so that they might bless his name, and have all the blessings I have recounted in these books. And he has rewarded them for their lives. For these were found to have loved heaven more than the life and the world. And now I will summon the spirits of the pious, who are from this the generation of light, and I will transform those who descended into the darkness, who in their bodies were not rewarded. They will now be rewarded with honor appropriate to their faithfulness. Indeed, I will bring forth in shining light those who loved my holy name, and I will seat each one on a throne of his honor, and they will shine for times without number. The righteous, as they shine, will see those who were born in darkness cast into the darkness. And the sinners will cry out and see them shining. And they, for their part, will depart to where the days and times are written for them. Here ends the revelation of the secrets of Enoch.